Are you confused? I'm confused. All right, so yesterday someone asked me about the SharePoint Forms button, right? This new little button that popped up at the top. And like, hey, what does that do? And I'm like, I don't know, I've never seen it before. And so I went and learned about it. And then I realized that, man, it changes a bunch of security problems, right? So like if you ever had security challenges with getting SharePoint data in, then that one might be the answer to you. But so then I said, well, okay, well, but it's kind of like Microsoft List. So how does Microsoft List factor in here? And I said, well, that's SharePoint Forms. What are forms? And then where does PowerApps fit in? So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to do a hands-on walkthrough of all of these new functionalities. And then we're going to explain the security ramifications, the features that can work. And then we're going to kind of walk you through them from simplest scenario, I just need to grab some quick data, to a more complex scenario. So you have a full picture of, hey, I want to get some data into SharePoint. How do I do it? If that sounds like fun, then let's switch over to my desktop and take a look. All right, so here we are in SharePoint, and you can see what this new form scenario, the thing that started us down this rabbit hole. Now, what I want to do first is create us a list. So let's go over here to Site Contents, like so, and we're going to do a new list. Let's do a blank list. We'll call it My Demo, because I'm very creative, and we'll leave that there, and we'll say create, right? And the reason I want to start with a brand new list is so that way you can see like everything I did. So you can't be like, hey, what did you do behind the scenes? I didn't do nothing that you didn't see. Now, the first thing I want to do with this list here is I want to jump over here and look at its permissions real quick, right? So we'll go here to list settings and then permissions for this list, right? Because security is going to kind of play in this conversation. You can see that right now I have a members group and an owners group. And so this members group, I don't want them to have any access, right? This would be one of the neat things I think about the first option we're going to look at. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the up here and say stop inheriting permissions, say okay. I'm usually not a huge fan of breaking permissions, but this one's got what I don't want. So we're going to get rid of it. So we're going to click this button, say okay. And so then now just the owners. And the key thing is that Chewy, who we're going to use to do the testing, is not a owner here. So we know that he can't get in there. You know what? Now SharePoint's just got me all lost. All right, we'll just go click on our list down here at the bottom, My Demo. There's not an easy way to get back to where we want, right? Here's where we want. So now let's add a couple quick columns. So we've got a title column. We're going to add another one here. I will make it a choice. We'll say next. And we're going to collect people's favorite color, right? Because it doesn't matter what information you're collecting. What you're going to do is not going to change, right? And we're just going to change this to be blue, green, and brown. We'll hit save. So we got that column, and then we're going to add a second column because I realized later in the demo I need another column. So we're going to do number, say next, and we're going to say favorite number, and just leave all of that and say save. If you ever watch Cougar Town, Grayson used to ask on his dates, well, what's your favorite number? Oh, 4 is kind of cool. But if you're not a Cougar Town fan, you're like, this dumb quote. It's fine. The rest of you liked it. So there you go. We got title, favorite color, and whatever, right? And so we know if we want to collect information in here, like the most traditional way would be just go up here and say add a new item. And so then here, you know, we've got Buddy, and then his favorite color, I guess, is going to be green, and his favorite number is 4 because he's pretty cool. And we've got attachments there, right? And so if we say save, boom, we've got data in there. Yeah, I think you all knew how to do that, but that's okay. What I want you to see though, so let's copy this URL and let's go check on Chewy. So let's open our browser as Chewy, right? And so when we're in here's Chewy, right? You'll notice that we've got, it says personal up here. It's a green top, right? So that's kind of how you know where it's Chewy. And so we're going to give Chewy the URL straight to that list. And what happens, right? Access denied because we took away his permissions. All right, so we're set up, we're good. We're right, but hey, I want Chewy to be able to collect, I want to collect information for this. And so the first thing we're going to look at here is the new super simple thing in SharePoint called Forms. So if you click Forms here, right, don't confuse this with Forms, the products, which we'll look at later. Ugh. We can go here and we can say new form. And so weirdly enough, this form, you know, is, I don't know, it's odd, right? But here we can see that by saying click on it, we've got add a form title, right? So tell me about you. What is this form about? Getting data. Now we've got title, favorite color, favorite number. You can see that it looks terrible because I've got the dark theme and edge turned on. I guess they need to fix that. I don't know what to tell them. But you can see it automatically pulled in title, favorite color, and favorite number. I can rearrange them. So I can grab this, pull this up here. You know, if I go into like favorite number here, I can change it required or not. I can edit the columns. Be careful, like this doesn't just change it for the form. This would change my whole column. So this would break favorite number if I said all of a sudden it was single line text. We also here, you know, we've got some different things. Like if we click on settings, that opens the more traditional setting. Remember, this is changing the column itself. This isn't just for the form. This is changing your data, which can be scary. So we cancel out of that. We've got, you know, those same type of thing with, you know, if we got a favorite color, we could add a favorite color, blah, blah, blah. If you're like, cool, this form looks great. That is nice. So showing hiding is as simple as a check mark. For the themes, right, they've got some weird themes here. It really is changing the background, or you can say create your own style. And then you can set the background color, and this turns out the theme color is the button color is what that's going to be. So we'll see an orange button in a minute. And then down here under settings, accept responses, right? So we're going to see if we can turn this on or off. and then confirmation, you did it. So there, we've created our form. You can see right here, it's hard to read, but we're saving changes and now it's saved. If we X out, nothing happens here. I want you to know this. Like if you say add new item, notice this is still the SharePoint form. This is not the form SharePoint form. I don't know. This is not the thing we just created. This is the standard SharePoint form. This is super confusing. This is why this video is so confusing. But if we go back to this forms, we've got this tell me about you. And so we can start editing again. We don't want to edit again. But what I want to do is I want to go here and, so edit, stop accepting, duplicate, delete. No, we want this link right here. If we click this, that is going to let us copy the link. Now, what's cool about copying this link is now I've copied it. If we switch back over here as Chewy, so we say we send it to him via email, Teams, whatever. Look at this. Chewy can fill out the form even though he doesn't have access to the list. Notice it's not SharePoint, it's using the list thing, right? So I call it Forms, which is a different product. It's using the list icon, which is a different product. Whatever. But so it doesn't tell Chewy where it's happening at. He doesn't have any of the SharePoint Chrome, but he can go in here and be like Chewy, and then his favorite number is 2. I don't know why. And then his favorite color is brown. And if Chewy hits submit, boom, there you go. Thank you. You did it. Like you see all these different pieces. Notice like we didn't get really customized anything more than you did it. Chewy can submit another response, right? There's no way to turn that off, so we can make it more. If we go back over here, right? This is me again. And so when we refresh the browser, I want you to see this. It's not here. You're like, oh, it doesn't work. It takes like a minute for this to show up. I don't understand why. I guess the shenanigans they're doing in the background, but it does take a few moments, or maybe a minute's wrong. 30 seconds. I don't know. It takes a minute. I'm going to say a minute over and over again, but there it is. It is here. But remember, right? Like Chewy still can't get there. Like if he looks at the URL, it's like, oh, sites PA. He tries to go there. Oh, well, Chewy can go to the site because Chewy has access to the site because he's a site member. Yeah, that's not right. Or that's not wrong, right? If we go back to the list, he doesn't have access to the list, sorry. So if we give him access even directly to the list, it gave him a role, like a special limited access. So if you gave him the URL, he can't find the URL, but if he gave him the URL, he still can't even see his own. This is an interesting, some mechanic behind the scenes, even though Chewy didn't have access to the list, took Chewy's request and then processed it and then uploaded it. Think about how many times you've asked me for something like that. Like, hey, I want users to be able to submit stuff to SharePoint, but I don't want to give them permissions, right? It's one of the PowerApps challenges we have because PowerApps, Chewy would need permission to submit the data. So this is something cool that this new form thing does, is it lets someone like a Chewy submit data via this form that I gave him, but he doesn't have any access to the data, even his own data. That's a new trick. Also here, so we saw we have stop accepting responses. So say that whatever you're collecting, you want Chewy to stop spamming your list, right? Stop accepting requests. And now if we copy the link, let's copy it again. I got my clipboard or whatever. So now if we go over here and paste that link in, so if you open the old email, the old Teams thing, we're not accepting responses at this moment. But that's the only control you have. Before you get super excited about this is neat, this is interesting, I agree. But people immediately start complaining about, like, well, I want to add branching logic to this, right? I can do that in Forms. Well, you can't do that here. I want to have, different criteria. Nope, can't do that. I want to be able to use this with external people. Nope, can't do that, right? There's a bunch of basically I've shown you every feature that's here. You can't do anything with this that I didn't just show you. Every creative thing that you're thinking of probably doesn't work. Go try it. I love creativity. See, prove me wrong. But really, this is just meant to be simple, straightforward, right? Like think of, Bobby in accounting or Susie in finance, right? Like someone who knows nothing about this. And I just want to collect some data real fast. This could be a way for them to do it without having to do really any thinking, right? Like literally we said create a form and then we just checked the fields and we were there, right? We could drag and drop them around. That was about the extent of what we could do. Okay. But this is the new, I guess we're calling it SharePoint Forms, right? We got SharePoint Forms, we got Forms. There's other forms in the work, like Microsoft, quit using the same word for everything. All right, so now what I want to do is how does Microsoft List fit into this, right? Because that was the next question I had. I saw the little list logo over there. I'm like, why, where, what? Let's go over here to office.com. And then if we go into the apps, right, and we say all apps, we know that somewhere in here, we've got Microsoft List. This is one of those ones I have struggled with for a long time. Like, what is Microsoft List? I'm probably going to get this wrong. Some list purists will get angry for me. Well, all I think of List is it's a wrapper over SharePoint, right? All the data that you store in Microsoft List is really just going in SharePoint. All the SharePoint data is exposed to List. It's just this wrapper that lets you interact with your SharePoint data without all the SharePoint web parts and the SharePoint, pieces and all that. Like it's literally just the list, right? So back to, is SharePoint a database? Well, if SharePoint was a database, this would be the front end for your database. I know I upset people with that. I'm sorry. But look, just as fast as we got over here, right? My demo, the thing that we just made together, it's here. Because if we look, this is really SharePoint sites PA, that's my SharePoint site list. My demo, that's our list, all items. And all they're doing is tacking on this little thing. And that's what makes it a list, right? Like if we Control X that out, right? And look, there's Buddy and Chewy. So I took that out. If I hit enter, oh, I gotta put my URL back here. Now if I hit enter, oh, look, it's my SharePoint site. Oh, what? You add that little parameter on back up there? Oh, look, it's Microsoft List. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it at all. But I wanted you to see it. The reason I wanted you to see this is another way to collect SharePoint data. Now, if we go over here and we say, look, there's that forms thing, right? So we can get right back into that, showing you how much it's SharePoint. But if we go to add new item, so this is our SharePoint built-in form, right? And one of the keys here is notice attachments was here. With that fancy new form, you can't do attachments yet. Ugh. But there, that's how we know this is what we just did over there. With this one, like we can't just drag and drop and edit things. But if you go over here and click, one of the options you have is configure layout. So when you do this is another oddity. You can use JSON to make things look different. You know what we're gonna do? We're just gonna click this Learn More button. I don't want to teach this to you. I want you to show it's possible. You can go learn about it later if you want. And here they kind of explain how this works. Well, the reason I want you to see this, not to read their documentation, but look, they give you some examples. So if we say copy here, right, that copied this JSON, and that's the header JSON. If we go over here to header and we just paste in their yuck, right? Like this is JSON. If you haven't learned JSON, there's a link up there that I feel like everyone should know JSON at this point in our lives. Like maybe you don't understand what all this does, but you should be like, all right, well, so that curly bracket means it's a record. Elm type equals div. Like you should understand the basics of what's going on here. Because if you understand the basics, like if you look down here, you can be like, well, you know what? It says text content, content details for, and title. If we say save, and now let's just X out of here. Let's click on Buddy's record. What do we get here? Look, contact details for Buddy, right? Like turn off the comments. That is automatically working for us. And if I wanted to change what that said, because I'm pretty comfortable with JSON, right? I could go down here and be like, all right, well, contact details for my dog. And now it says Buddy, which would make no sense because, well, Chewy's a dog too. So it would make sense. All right. But if I want to start changing the font size, the colors, all of that is in here. So you can apply formatting to the header. You can do it to the footer. The footer is going to be the same, right? It's just going to bolt in a footer at the bottom. We're not going to bother doing that. And then the body, this one's a little trickier. So we're going to play with this one for a second. So if we go back over here, once again, they have a nice, right? We're going to skip the footer because it's just copy and paste again. But the body, you can use it to introduce sections. So you can change it functionally as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this body here, right? So this one, we're going to say copy. We go over here and paste it in. Now, when you paste this in, if we just say save, you're going to get please enter valid JSON. That's because you see these here where they put in these comments freak it out, right? So if you delete these comments out, like it took me a hot minute to figure it out, but once again, it wasn't valid JSON. If we say save, now notice that it automatically switches to a column layout. And what's neat about this one, or I guess neat's probably the wrong word, but something to know is that because right now I only have, oh, that's the wrong one, body. Because I have title in the first section and there's a second section, there's no fields. That's why you're not seeing it there. And all of the fields that you add that aren't listed anywhere, they go into the first section, right? So they go into the last section automatically. So like that's why you see that favorite color and favorite number are down here in their own section. If I was to get rid of that second section, right? And I'm comfortable doing this because I know how to edit JSON. Remember the video I showed you a second ago? You should have watched it. And so now if we blow that out, and now if we say save, now they're all in the one section, but we've got the multi-column. So this is how you get it to do multi-column on these fancy little forms. And there is 1,000 different internet posts about how to write, or like JSON, you can copy and paste to do different formatting things. That's not, I want you to know that you can do it. I don't want to teach it to you, but now we can kind of see that is how we do it. And notice that like it goes from 3 to 2, so it's automatically responsive, figuring out how many columns it has room for, so you don't control the number of columns, at least in the stuff I've done so far. So now we've got Microsoft List. And once again, if you're thinking, can Chewy get to this? Let's copy. Let's go over here. Let's go ask our dog, Chewy. Let's hit this, paste this in. And so, oh, I'm not logged in as Chewy. I'm logged in as me. Oh my goodness, I about freaked out. Let's log in as Chewy. Let's paste this in. And so yes, Chewy can get to it, but no, Chewy can't see into data, and no, Chewy can't add his own, right? And there is no way through this interface to give Chewy that secret link like the Forms one did, right? This Forms one is the only link that gets around the security requirements. That's what made that one neat. But of course, if we do add new item and we just do, me, and my favorite color is going to be blue, like my eyes. And my favorite number, I was 32. That was my basketball number. There you go. So we'll say save. Okay, so now let's go look real for a second at Forms, right? So if you go to forms.microsoft.com, this is part of your Microsoft 365 subscription, right? Everything's been covered in your same subscription, right? So don't think you need a special license for anything I've done. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, hit the like button, subscribe. Come on, please. No, it's okay, right? But also remember, I run lots of trainings. I've got some live training classes coming up. Go to training.powerapps911.com. I'm always teaching live classes. I've got on-demand classes, and I promise all my classes, I am as crazy and as scatterbrained as I am in this one, but that's the fun, right? Like you don't just see canned perfect demos, you see working stuff and how I get through all the problems, and that's where the way you really learn. Over here, we have the ability to create forms. For example, if I said I want to do a new form, great, we're now greeted with Copilot, and so we might say something like, please create me a form to capture someone's name, favorite color, and favorite number. Sound familiar? For favorite color, offer them a choice of blue, green, brown. Thanks. And we say generate. And the reason Copilot's great because it's going to build the whole form. I don't have to go click all the buttons. What's important to note here is that when you create this form, or it creates a form for you, this data, it is not hooked up to my SharePoint list, right? If you think about it, the SharePoint forms, the built-in SharePoint forms, the form, I don't know, all the things we've done up to this point have been built in, have just been tied to that SharePoint list automatically. By creating something in Microsoft Forms, yes, we can collect that same data, but this data will be stored, let's say, keep it real quick. This data will be stored inside of an Excel table behind the scenes, right? Like it's not connected to our SharePoint list in any way. So then why do I even bother showing you this fancy thing? Well, the reason I want you to see this is because this is a great way to collect information very simply, right? But this one can even be used outside your organization, right? I can make this form anonymous so I can post it on the internet. Like if you go to PowerApps911.com and you fill out our apply for a job there, right? Like that is a Microsoft form that people do to fill in, their stuff. And then that data gets whooshed into our system for us. So forms are a great tool to collect information. But in this case, we were trying to get it into our SharePoint list. Forms and SharePoint don't natively talk to each other. Hey, we're gonna solve that in a second. With forms, right, we kind of have the same stuff we saw before. We can rearrange, we can name, we can make our own questions, right? I can use AI to build it thanks to Copilot. But if you add questions, there's all these different types. You can do branching logic. You can do multi-pages. If you were thinking, man, I wish I could build cooler interfaces and more options than the other one, right? Which you couldn't. This is the place that you can build those multi-step things. And then once we built it, if we go up here and we go to settings, then we can say anyone can respond, only people in my company record their stuff, only let them do it once, right? That might be another requirement, only specific people. You have ways to shuffle. Like there's a lot. And once again, I'm not here to teach you forms today, but I want you to understand that this is possible. Then we're saying, well, but I need it in that SharePoint list. So then what you would do is you'd use a Power Automate Cloud flow. And using one of your flows, you can build a flow that grabs the data from the form. Every time somebody figures out this form, trigger the flow, whoop, and then that flow grabs the data. Maybe it runs it through an approval process. Maybe it emails a copy. In our case with PowerApps 911, it puts it into a SharePoint list directly for us. So that's where we use to manage our hiring process. You have different options on how you do it. Doesn't matter. Now, I'll put a link to a video up there. I've got some different ones. I don't know which one I'm going to share with you, but on using Microsoft Forms, because a lot of times in our PowerApps solutions, if we need to collect data externally, we'll use a form, have that data collected anonymously from the internet, and then we'll route it through a flow, and then flow will put it into SQL or Dataverse or SharePoint, wherever it needs to go in order to then facilitate the Power App that we built on top of it, right? For the internal process of working with the data. So it's very common, not very common, but it is common in our Power App solutions to have a forms component. So you should be familiar with this tool. Everything has changed. How would I make a flow to do it? Well, I showed you the video, but if you went over here to flow real quick, and then you go to templates and look right there on the front page, form processing email. And so if we click on that, basically that would take your Microsoft Forms data, and then it grabs the data, it sends off an email, a SharePoint, and then you can edit the flow, right? The flow templates are really easy to work with, but it's foundationally what you want, or my video is much better. Forms, I don't know how to say this. I keep using the word form. It's driving me bonkers. It's probably driving you bonkers, but this Forms product that we've talked about, this one is a great tool to get the data, but it doesn't natively save to SharePoint. It natively saves to Excel. And so it's up to you to write an interface, and Cloudflows make it easy, but you gotta do the plumbing to get the data over. With this having more security options and more flexibility around branching and other things. So then back to SharePoint, right? If we refresh, right, we should see there's my Shane record. No surprise, right? All the data is getting stored in our SharePoint database. That's right. I'm making people angry again. It's okay. I want to make, we know if we just add new item, oh, look, right? Remember we made those changes in the JSON over in list? Look, they came through here. Because once again, Microsoft List is just a wrapper on top of SharePoint. So all of our stuff came through. So I wanted you to see that. But if you're like, no, I need this to be fancier. Very common thing. So at that point, what we're most likely going to do is we're going to bring in PowerApps. Now, there's two different ways to bring in PowerApps. Is we're going to click on integrate here. Like they keep moving this. It drives me bonkers. Microsoft, leave this alone. And then look, integrate PowerApps. Create an app is what we're going to do in a second. What we want is customized forms. So this is another very popular option until they buried it 7 links deep. If you click on customized forms, right, and I can give the SharePoint team grief because I was a SharePoint MVP for many, many, many years, right? I've written 6 SharePoint books. I'm qualified to give SharePoint team grief. But what this is going to do is this is going to build us a PowerApps form. There's that form word again, that is going to be embedded inside of SharePoint. So instead of using the SharePoint editing experience, we're going to use a PowerApps driven editing experience to get the same type of stuff. So after a few seconds there, you can see here, this is now PowerApps. So all the things you know how to do with PowerApps. If I wanted to add a button to send an email or create a PDF, or I just want to change my screen color to be, this baby blue color, right? Like whatever you know how to do in PowerApps, that is going to work here. And all this is doing is changing the experience, right? You see this little SharePoint integration object over here? This only shows up in the case of these customized forms. But that is where if you want to change what happened when they click on the SharePoint new button or the SharePoint save button, right? Notice there's no buttons over here. When you click on the SharePoint save button, it is doing a submit form, SharePoint form 1, which is this form. So you come over here and make your changes. Now tread lightly. Don't try to write like a whole multi-system app here, but if you're just looking to make your SharePoint interface blue and add maybe a couple buttons, like one of the demos I do, I add a Power BI chart in here and then give them a deep link, right? Just little simple things like that. You can absolutely do that. And there'll be a link up there to a video that is all about how this works, right? I'm not trying to teach how this all works right now, but it goes through all the nitty gritty of all the pieces. But once you're happy with what you've done here, now what you're gonna do is you're gonna say back to SharePoint. We're gonna save and publish. Also keep in mind why it's the saving and publishing, that this form that you just built there, or that app you just built there, it is SharePoint's. It is not yours. It is SharePoint's, and SharePoint is letting you edit it. So there's some weird things you can't do, like save as and reuse them and stuff, right? All covered in that video I just pointed to, but I want to kind of note that there are some limitations there. But look, now that we're back over here, if we click on Chewy, okay, when we click on Chewy, this is the old experience. That happens. It's okay. Hit refresh, right? Sometimes it takes a few seconds. Let's try scan. Let's click on Buddy this time. Buddy's good luck. There we go. So now you can see over here, it is fetching your app. There's that baby blue color, and it is a Power App embedded into my SharePoint browser. So this is using Power Apps to make SharePoint better. All right, and the nice thing is now you could rearrange these. You could add conditional logic. Anything you know how to do, or almost anything you know how to do in Power Apps, you can apply right over here. So if you really want to create a better SharePoint experience and you want more customization than that JSON you saw, that forms thing is not going to work for you, right? That'll all work. Now, what's important here though, let's go here, let's say new, let's copy the link, right? So remember with that forms form, we were able to send that over to Chewy. What happens if we send this one to Chewy? Copy, paste. Chewy does not have access, right? Because Power Apps relies on the user that is using the app's permission to talk to SharePoint. Chewy doesn't have permission to talk to SharePoint. So this is one of those places where the form thing that I showed you, SharePoint form, I don't know what that thing's called. That SharePoint form thing got real interesting because we know that if we give Chewy, right, that link doesn't work. But if we give Chewy this, let's activate it, start accepting responses. If we give Chewy this link, go over here and we open a new browser, he can enter data, right? Because we know there's some backend machinery that's doing that we didn't do, it just magically showed. So keep that in mind, right? If you're trying to lock down things, but right, Power Apps can't use any of this woohoo. It's only if you're doing it directly in a SharePoint scenario. I thought that was kind of a fun thing, right? Like once again, this is back to the whole starting out super confused, right? Like when it comes to SharePoint data and collecting it, there's a lot of different options. And they all kind of do something slightly different. And so speaking of options, the very last 1-ish, maybe 1A, 1B, I'm gonna show you here. So then we of course have PowerApps and then create an app. And so we'll call this my demo app again. We're gonna put 2 or something in case I called it that before. We'll say create. And so what this is going to do is it's going to share a PowerApps, and it's going to build us that old traditional app that is pre-built with a gallery and a form and all that. We're running with SharePoint as the backend. SharePoint the database, I made you mad again. This is a very, this is the most or more typical scenario because now we're gonna have a standalone Power App. It still has all the security things, but now instead of interacting with it via SharePoint, we're gonna interact with it via the Power App, whether it's the Power App here in my browser, Power App on my Power Apps on my phone, Power App embedded in Teams. Right, but now it's going to be a standalone app that just happens to store the data in SharePoint. And ta-da! And so then once again, you could customize this and do all the fun things. Or really what I would probably have done if I was trying to build a standalone app, I don't ever, or very rarely use the option over there, right? I would have just come over here and I would have said either create and just started with a blank app and pulled in SharePoint, as a data source. Or one of the neat things here now under the here, if you say start with data, if we say connect external data, and we could choose our SharePoint list here, and then this would build that bigger multi-screen, or not multi-screen, but that bigger new responsive app style that they're kind of pushing, right? Because this one was the tall, skinny, the mobile phone form factor. Right, if we go over here, I'm going to run through this real quick. All right, if we click on Power Apps Videos, click on My Demo and say create the app. And there you go. After a few seconds, right, it just drops you in. The nice thing about this app is it's responsive. It's all on one screen and it fits better on desktop, but it works on a desktop or a mobile without any work. That would be if you were trying to still be simple. And of course, the blank app is probably the way I would have most likely have done things. So there you go. Lots and lots and lots of ways to collect SharePoint data. None of them are right or wrong, right? They all have their pros, their cons, from simple to, complex. But, I challenge you to understand them all yourself first. But B, if you're one of those people that's in charge of, getting apps and rolling this stuff out of your organization, like maybe instead of just always teaching Power Apps, I love Power Apps. My company's called PowerApps 911. I love Power Apps, but we need to teach all the pieces. We need to be talking about the right tool. And if they just want some simple stuff, right, let's show them the simplest way to get it in there, build their confidence so we can slowly get them into the more complex scenarios and building fully functional, integrated, relational, upside down, backwards apps like we do in Power Apps. Okay? Questions, comments, thoughts, right? Also, if you're thinking, man, Shane, you missed some things. Probably, right? But I didn't miss any of the core tools. I know there's third-party stuff, there's SPFX stuff. I know there's even more stuff, but at some point we got to stop recording, right? So that's where we kind of landed with all this. All right. And with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day.